Now you're planning your next long motorcycle trip, maybe a bit further away, maybe even overseas, coming to Europe. These would be my top 5 tips to get you prepared for that ultimate motorcycle adventure. Tip number 1 is research your route and destination. Now, there's 2 camps of riders. Some just hop on the motorcycle and just follow the sunset and call that a trip. Now, if you're going a bit further away to a place or country that you may not be so familiar with, and if you have limited time, my suggestion would be to spend a little bit of time on preparing that trip. So kind of get an idea of what you want to see. Look at the route planning, because depending on where you're coming from, you may be doing more or less kilometers than what you're used to in a single day. You know, if you're going in the Alps, for example, you'll be riding a lot less kilometers than maybe on a straight road on the flat land. So it helps to kind of get prepared to that. Research your area, look at sort of the most interesting motorcycle roads in that particular area. There's so many great places, especially when you're coming to Europe, where it really makes sense to do your research before you come. There are definitely ways to fast track the researching part of it. You can buy ready-made tour packages all the way to joining a guided motorcycle tour. One of the tours that I'm offering, for example, so all the route planning and destination sort of location scouting has been done and has been taken care of you. That's probably one of the easiest way of doing it. If you want to go on your own, definitely do your research because you just get a lot more out of your adventure as if you were coming unprepared. Number 2 on the list is absolutely get familiarized with the laws and regulations of the countries that you're going through, especially when you're riding on a motorcycle. Taking Europe as an example, there are a few countries here you want to be very close to the speed limit because fines are extremely high, and those countries are definitely Switzerland and Norway. There's a few others that have a pretty strict sort of enforcement of speeding. It's easy to go fast. We all know it on a motorcycle. It's easy to go a little faster than you should. Some countries where you should really watch the speed. There's other regulations when it comes to noise levels, and that's something very specific to Austria. There are certain places and roads that you cannot go on with a motorcycle that is technically too loud. So depending if you bring your own motorcycle or if you rent a motorcycle, most rental bikes will not fall in that range, even though there's a few that may. So it's good to know, have an idea where you're going, that you don't sort of cross a road where you're not supposed to go if your motorcycle is too loud. That also includes other things like what to bring on a motorcycle. There's certain regulations where you have to bring a first aid kit. Sometimes you have to bring a reflective warning vest if your bike gets stranded. So there's little things like that, things that you need to bring. That's important when you bring your own bike. If you rent a motorcycle, these things should come with a rental motorcycle. There are toll roads that you need to understand how the toll works. The easiest are usually the toll stations, like in Italy and France, where you just roll up to the toll station and then you pull a ticket and then you pay sort of by the distance. That's pretty easy and you can't really miss that. But then there are things like Switzerland and Austria. They require you to put a sticker. You can do that now digitally, but it used to be you still can use a sticker. So it's a little sticker that you put on sort of windshield or somewhere on your motorcycle, where you pay the toll as a general toll for using their faster motorways. It's relatively cheap for a few days in Austria. I think it's about €5 or something. It's a bit more expensive in Switzerland. Everything is more expensive in Switzerland, but you have to take sort of an annual pass for that. So it's close to €40, I think. So it's just good to know. The fines are also a bit higher in Switzerland, so you don't want to get caught on the Swiss Autobahn without one of these stickers. Also, there's things with toll roads where sometimes you go through a single road and you would have to pay the toll, like in Austria with the toll sticker. Then there's additional toll if you, for example, go over the Brenner Pass, and there's additional toll when you enter a different country. So it's easy to maybe forget that sometimes, and then you get fined after the fact. So if you're going on major roads, at least you read up on sort of their toll system and how it works, so you'd sort of spare yourself the potential ticket you may get. Number 3, that's really preparing yourself for the journey. I don't think that's a very obvious one, but if you go touring for multiple days in a row, longer kilometers, full day rides, and you go them back to back, it really makes sense to get prepared for that. So what I mean by that is, if you're usually just riding on the weekends, maybe a day or two, and maybe not the full distance because you're just riding with buddies and you're just maybe doing half the kilometers that you would be doing on the full tour where you're doing 10 days back to back of this type of riding, it probably makes sense to kind of build up the stamina to ride longer distances like this. It's not a good idea to jump on the bike for the first time in the season and ride a 10-day tour and expect everything to work out really well. Even for me, as someone that rides a lot in a year, that's not what I do. I kind of build up to it as well. And it may be easy to forget, or sometimes, you don't have the time to do it, but I can really recommend doing that, just kind of building up a little bit of stamina, that it's a lot more enjoyable than for a longer ride that you've done something in the season. And it's a good reason to get your bike out, even if the weather may not be ideal, just to do some riding to prepare yourself. The second thing I would recommend when it comes to preparing yourself is depending on where you go. Now, we have in Europe some of the most demanding roads that you can find on pavement, and these are the Alps, alpine passes with tight hairpin turns, and depending on your skill level or when the last time was that you were riding roads like this, there's a good way to sort of prepare for that as well. A rider's training is usually a very good idea, because usually in a rider's training you go through the whole range of things that you picked up in driving school, and then some more. So it's the typical sort of agility parts, taking tighter corners and just kind of reiterating all those steps to get you ready. And despite the fact that I ride a lot more than most other riders in the year, I still make it a point to go to rider trainings like this. Every beginning of the season I do a training like this. It's a very basic training. It's the advanced level, but it's still very basic training where you do your basic steps. And I think it's a very good preparation, because these are sort of perishable skills. Certain things, if you don't keep training them enough, and one of the things is emergency braking and dodging. It's definitely something I don't train for. If you take plenty of corners in a year, you kind of get used to that again. But it's things like that are definitely worth sort of training for and investing in yourself. It just boosts your confidence when you go on the tour, and it just gets you ready for some of the unexpected stuff that can happen on the road. So I can fully recommend that. Like I said, I do it myself. It's the minimum training that I do. I usually do a lot more throughout the year, but that's the first and I think most important training that I do for myself as well. So I can fully recommend that when you go on the tour in Europe. Tip number 4, think about what you're going to bring with regards to riding gear. Now, if you're coming from further away and you need to rent your motorcycle and potentially don't want to bring too much stuff, and you're looking at an option of renting your riding gear or bringing the riding gear, there's pros and cons to both. First off, if you are looking into renting gear because you just want to travel light, then you need to find a place that rents out gear. Not every motorcycle rental place will actually rent out gear. So pants, jackets, helmet, gloves, and boots. If that's important to you, make sure you check that out beforehand. If you book a guided tour with me, my rental partner, he actually has a wide range of high quality climb Gore-Tex gear. So if you're just looking for pants and jacket, he has that. He has all sizes of boots, or most common sizes, let's put it this way, helmets and things like that. So if you are just supplementing some of it, or you just want the full spiel, you can definitely get it from his place, and if you're booking it through my tours. The other thing that you need to consider though is depending if you're pretty easy when it comes to fitting. Typically a jacket is the easiest thing, most common size, and I find that for myself too. Most jackets fit. Pants, different story. Some pants fit, some don't. So you might want to consider that. And I think it's even worse when it comes to boots and helmets. Now, boots need to be worn in, depending on how sensitive the issue is with finding the right boot size. But just consider if it makes sense to bring your own boots. If those are good boots and you're comfortable in them, they're waterproof, they're good for touring. They weigh a little bit, but if you're comfortable in them and usually have a hard time finding the right fitting boot, maybe you just bring them. The same with the helmet. The helmet is another thing that some people have a really hard time finding the right fitting helmet. I'm one of those as well. So when it comes to having a rental helmet, yes, it's there, but if it's not fitting snug and it's a safety issue, is one thing, and the other thing is just comfort. You know, if you're constantly thinking about wearing this helmet and it's not fitting right, that can completely spoil the journey. So consider these things as you weigh the options between sort of renting your gear and bringing your own. Maybe you just bring some things and rent other things if you still want to travel light. That's an idea. So pick out the things that are really important. If it's pants for you, bring your pants. If it's boots or helmet, bring one of these two. So yes, they're bulky, but it may make sense. Also, if you're bringing extra luggage, look at the cost of how much it costs to rent gear versus just bringing an extra bag. Nowadays, depending on where you're coming from, this might actually even be more cost effective just to bring another bag, and then you can usually leave it. If you're renting a motorcycle, you leave it at a rental station, all the other stuff in the empty bags, and you just put your gear on, ride, come back, and then have it all ready to go when you fly back. So something to consider. And last but not least, number 5, pack light. Not the stuff that you bring to the country you're traveling to, but pack light for the stuff you want to bring on the bike. That sounds a bit obvious, but it isn't really, depending on how often you travel and how used you are to sort of packing efficiently. I can tell you I wasn't when I started out. I didn't know what to bring, so I brought everything. I know most people will tell you in their first few trips, they probably bring too much. Now, it makes a huge difference how much weight you carry on the bike. Now, most bikes that you can rent, again, the bikes that you can rent from my rental partner, they have big panniers, big top boxes. You can even put a soft bag on top. You can bring tons of stuff on the bike, definitely enough for 2 people. But the question is, do you want to do that? Do you want to bring all that stuff? Because every kilogram, every pound that you add to your ride, it just affects the handling of the bike. It's just something to consider. The fewer things that you bring, I think the more benefits you have from the ride. It's just going to be a more agile ride overall. Maybe you don't have to bring big panniers and you have a bit of a slimmer bike. It's easier to maneuver through traffic. It's easier to sort of maneuver the bike, if just sitting there. Something to consider. I did a dedicated video on that, so if you're interested in sort of my pro tips on how to pack properly, it's our 200,000 kilometers of experience. I think I've got it down to a point, and it's not like extreme packing, but it is packing sort of in the right balance. I still bring a few things for comfort in there, but I think I've got it down pretty well. So if you're interested in that, make sure to see this video.